In this episode, we are fortunate to have a triumvirate of designers, the team behind Flashpoint Legacy and Flashpoint Golden State Heroes, which is on Kickstarter now, and I highly recommend you go out and back it. Welcome to the Game Schooler podcast, Dr. Ken Franklin, Chris Leader, and Kevin Rodgers. The team is known as Cronoverse Labs. Welcome to the Game Schooler podcast. This is episode 223, a very special episode. We are fortunate to be joined by the design trio of Flashpoint. We have three amazing designers with us. One designer is returning, was with us in episode 177. Welcome back to the show, Chris Leader. Also joined by the other two. Are they compadres? Are they friends? Well, we'll let you guys decide. Ken Franklin and Kevin Rodgers. So welcome to the Game Schooler podcast. We're really grateful and honored to have you all here.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah.
Very excited to be here.
Yeah, collectively known as Chronoverse Labs.
That's
good. Thanks for getting that right.
We travel through space and time to bring you fun games. That's what we're all about.
I appreciate you risking your life to do that for us.
Yeah, thanks.
Where does that name come from?
So I think, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong on this, that we came up with that when the multiverse was becoming like the hot thing in the world. But multiverse just didn't seem like enough. And since the first game the three of us released was Back to the Future Dice Through Time, we traded out the multi for a chrono because that's time, right? So Chronoverse made a lot of sense because it's like universes of time, and we tinker like scientists, so it's the lab, so we're Cronoverse Labs.
There you go. Love it.
There is another time theme involved in this particular podcast.
What's that, Ken?
Well, between Mike and I, we have a paradox.
That would be two doctors, ladies and gentlemen. Two doctors equals one paradox.
Dad jokes coming out early.
Thanks for explaining that, Chris. All right.
Yeah.
Because I am the least smartest and qualified person on this interview. That's clear. Just hearing the description of Cronoverse, I was taking notes and trying to keep up. We've got a lot of questions for the three of you, so we'll see how this goes. Typically when we interview, we're interviewing one or two, so we're really grateful to have you all on. Doug, did you have an initial question, or should I just jump right in?
Well, I think let's start at the beginning. Where did you guys all meet and start designing games together? What's your origin story?
Ooh, I want to tell. I went to my first Gen Con in 2012, and actually, 2011, and got a game signed by Calliope Games. And when I came to the 2012 Gen Con, I was expecting to meet with Ray Weirs, the president, and say, okay, now what do we do next? It's signed. How do we publish it? And we went to a bar, and he said, I got to show you this. And he pulled out Roll For It. And he and I spent the entire afternoon not talking about my game one bit, but playing about 6 games of Roll For It. And that is how I met Chris Leader. And then shortly after that, we went to a Grand Con in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and that's where I met Kevin. And they were nice enough to allow me to join their lifelong friendship, and it's been a great ride ever since.
Yeah, and actually, if you want to hop into the time machine and go back, 2 decades further, you'll find where Kevin and I met, which was in 7th grade, when we were just little wee lads who didn't know anything about board game design. So Kev and I have been best buds since 7th grade. We had a little group of friends, and we grew up together in suburbs outside Chicago, and so the nice thing about that was that we were ready to make the first game the three of us would ever make because I'm a huge Back to the Future fan. Everybody knows this about me. Kev, what's your take on being a big Back to the Future fan?
So I always thought I was one of the biggest Back to the Future fans ever. I could quote the movie. I knew, the little bits of obscure trivia. And then when I asked Chris about it, I realized I didn't know anything about Back to the Future, and I wasn't even sure that I had seen Back to the Future because he completely dwarfed it. But yeah, like Chris said, we go back forever ago.
Yeah, and so
I'm curious. What? Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying, when I got into designing games, Kev was there as one of my very early testers. He was there, when Roll For It was still in its infancy. He was playing that, and some of my old games, City of Gears and Trainmaker and those, he was there for that. And the fun thing about that was that we always dreamt that one day we could make a Back to the Future game. So we had already had talks that we had put on shelves forever ago about what would a Back to the Future game be. So then when we got the call that we could make one, that was back, now by that point we were friends with Ken, we were able to blow the dust off of our files and have a jump start on that game because we had already been talking about that for quite a while.
That's awesome. So, Ken, what was the game in 2012 that Calliope picked up?
It was at that point called Plunder, and it was based on a push your luck game that I had designed as shareware for the Apple II GS computer in 1991, and it then became the Mansky Caper, which was actually released in 2018.
So only 6 years to get that off the ground.
Or 26.
Well, yeah, that too. From inception, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Michael.
Well, I mean, that's the backstory, and that's incredible, and that's awesome. I know we're going to talk a lot about Flashpoint and Flashpoint Legacy, and that is the latest. And then you also have a crowdfunding venture that's happening right as we speak in the Flashpoint universe, and we're going to jump into that. I guess here's the question that I have that I'd really like to lead us into that, and Doug, interrupt if I don't get this right. But talk to me about co-designing games. I mean, anytime you're creative and you do something all by yourself in a lab, that's one experience. But if you want to try something challenging, bring somebody else into the lab and say, hey, we're going to do this together. So what's it like for the three of you to co-design? And then if you could kind of bring us into the Flashpoint universe as well throughout some of those answers.
I would say that when you say it's hard to do it together, it's easier. Like you're alone, you're able to do that stuff. My experience is that you hit brick walls when you're alone. If you collaborate with others and you're on the same wavelength and you're working towards the same goal, you carry each other across that finish line a lot better. And I think Ken facilitates that type of collaboration very well in his general outlook and positivity. So I'll throw it over to Ken because he's kind of a collaborative engine, or at least the spark that makes it go.
Well, we all enjoy playing games. We all have an ironclad friendship. And so there's a wonderful thing about coming at it from an assumption that we're all on the same wavelength. I know that Kevin is an amazing creative narrative constructor person, and he is the driving force behind the storyline of a lot of things we do. Chris is if you look in the dictionary under rule book, there's a picture of Chris Leader next to it. He is expert at going through the rules, saying, this isn't fun, this is fun, this doesn't make sense, this is hard to understand, this is easy. And he can distill an experience into a set of rules very quickly. And I'm an inveterate puzzle maker, so I've spent 60 years of my life reading puzzles and games and things like that. So I'm pretty good at lateral thinking. So when we start to approach a brick wall, I'm reasonably good at saying, hey, how about we go over here? And there may be a little hole in the wall over here, and then we go that way.
And I'll go even further in saying I wouldn't want to do this by myself. Um, there is nothing better than, for me, the collaborative spirit and the act of working together to solve the problem, to find a solution. That moment when you're gathered around a table and you're playing a game and you guys do something great and everybody cheers and raises their hands and think, this is awesome. We get to do that while making the game. We get to sit across from each other and go, no, 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 what about this? And then we go, yes, and then we have those moments while making it, and it's so much better of an experience for me to share it with them than it would be for me just going, oh, I fixed it and moving on. You know what I mean? I have no interest in doing this by myself.
So in that regard, I can see the idea of, obviously, like what you're saying, of if you get to a wall and you've got somebody to bounce an idea off of, or say, oh, I got a little nugget here. I don't know if it's anything, and you just put it out there, and either works or it doesn't. So it's like, that's the pro part about working collaborative. What happens when there's a disagreement? Because when you're alone, you just say, nope, this is the way I want to do it. This is how it's going to be. And you lose a little bit of that when you're working collaboratively. How do you guys resolve those issues? Or is it lucky enough to never have any of them, where somebody's like really strong about something and the other two or maybe it's just like, I don't know, that's not the way I see it, or maybe that's not the best choice?
We break a pool cue in half, and there's a pit in the backyard.
Okay.
As all disagreements should be resolved.
And whoever survives, you go, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
I think it's about. It's so boring, and I apologize to all of the viewers who are like, "This is such a bad answer." I apologize in advance. It's all just about. It's about respect. It's about. We're all driving towards the same result, and it's not about whose idea is best. It's about what's best for the game. So we don't have a lot of arguments in a creative way. And what we've kind of agreed to is we will not be offended if one of us throws an idea out there and somebody else either builds on that idea or comes up with a better solution that's more fun for the game. We tend to cheer each other on at that point. There's very few times where we go, no, that's a bad idea. I don't like that. That's terrible. It's more
We're all very good at saying, let's try this.
Yeah, and I also think that we are, it's a little bit like improv. It's the yes and, right? You're supposed to always be open to ideas and build upon them. So that's one of the synergies we've been able to create, is we know that we don't know exactly what the end result is supposed to be, but we know that we want to get to a really fun end result. And so we're going to take every expressway we can to get to that fun end result and listen to each other as we go.
How do you know that you're driving towards fun in game design? Like, how is that something that that you're heading towards, and it's not kind of a... Yeah, that's my question, I guess. I'll just end it there. How do you know when you're heading towards fun?
I will say that we design games for ourselves. Wouldn't you say that, guys? I mean, we design games that we would want to play. So let's look at Flashpoint. We may come up with a new concept for a map and say, this is how this system is going to work. Actually, let's go back and do a real one. Legacy of Flame, we were desperately trying to come up with a specific thing for one of the maps where you would play through it one time and you'd get to the end, and then surprise, surprise, there's a second fire that breaks out and you have to replay a second adventure immediately upon that. And I will say, I'm going to kick this over to the guy who was so all about that, and that's Kev, because we could never quite crack it. But Kev, go run with that one, because that's a fun story about how sometimes you have to let things go.
Yeah, so I had spoken to a couple of actual firefighters before we started doing this. My dad was a firefighter before he passed away. My uncle was a fire chief. I knew someone I was coaching with for my daughter's softball team who was a firefighter paramedic. So I'd ask them questions like, what are some things that, you know, we need to know in order to make this authentic as we possibly can. And one of the things they said one of the most dangerous times for firefighters is after the fire's out. And you're going through because your adrenaline's down, you're not focused as much, maybe you let something slip through. So we had thought, well, they're going through and they're doing the cleanup, making sure all the embers are out and all the other stuff when somebody misses something, and then all of a sudden it starts back up again. And we thought that would be cool. That would be a lot of fun. It'd be thematic. We could do a lot of great fun things with it. And we must have played that level 300 times and just couldn't get it. We couldn't break, and to a point where we're like, okay, that doesn't work. We'll have to try something else.
Because you can't predict how the game is going to end.
Yeah.
On one hand, you finish the game and you had almost no damage to the building. In another one, the building is in shambles and there's fire everywhere. So we could not predict how the game would end for the player, and so we couldn't pick it up and run with it for the second half.
Yeah, we tried to do that in Back to the Future as well by putting there's a location on there for Twin Pines Mall, and all we wanted to do is by the end of it have one say Lone Pine Mall. And we just couldn't figure out the best way to do that was fun and not just some random sticker that was in a box.
Sure. So how
sometimes you just got to go, okay, that's not going to work. Let's try something else.
So how did the project for Flashpoint come about? Because Flashpoint was an existing property, a game that had been designed already, and there now is the legacy version of that. So how did that whole process come together?
Well, around the last time there was a Flashpoint expansion was around 2017, 2018. And we have mutual friend Tricia Sidney, who at that point was working for Indie Boards and Cards. And I was speaking with her on an unrelated subject, and she said, I really wish there was a Flashpoint Legacy. People have tried it, and they couldn't ever get it to work. And I said, well, I'm going to make a Flashpoint Legacy. Can I please? She said, yes, go for it. So I called Kevin and Chris the next day, and I'd say it was less than a month before we had the first 3 scenarios done.
Yeah, that's where the thing that Ken talked about before flew immediately into gear, where Kev jumped up and said, I can write that story. And he came up with an amazing narrative for what it could be, which almost all of it held through the entire process. And, we started immediately just locking together and saying, how do we make this thing? And when a possible pitch comes our way, like not just an idea for something, but sometimes a publisher will say, we really could use this game, or, we have this license or whatever. If we are excited about one of those things, we are like a dog with a bone. We are going to go crazy, and we won't make like a text presentation of what this thing could be. You're going to get like mock-ups and gameplay and all kinds of stuff. If you're a publisher, you're in for a treat with what we're going to provide you to show you what it could be.
When I was a kid, I loved imagining having a table, a magic table, that you could push a button and it turned into the board for that game. So instead of having a bunch of boxes on the wall, it was on camera. And we've seen in conventions people try to do that with ridiculous costs. Well, Tabletop Simulator came around. I get a lot of fun out of using Tabletop Simulator. So even though Chris and Kev both live in Illinois and I live in Michigan, if we have an idea, we can meet around a table and test it within a week.
That's incredible.
And that was very useful for Legacy because we really kicked that off during the pandemic. I mean, we got that assignment in the thick of the lockdown. And so there was no way we were going to meet up for the weekend and pound this thing out on cardboard on a table. We had to do it. It was invention was born out of necessity for sure in that case. And Ken became very skillful at Tabletop Simulator. So we were able to move leaps and bounds ahead with it because of that. And then we carried that through with Golden State Heroes and other things that we've done. Tabletop Simulator has been wonderful for that.
Yeah.
So what?
Chris and I were a block away from each other and couldn't meet up. So it was definitely something that was a
Yeah.
challenge, but it was fantastic to work through.
So what's the difference between designing, say, a Back to the Future game where it's the single game compared to a legacy game, which is essentially the idea of, depending on how many scenarios come into a game, it can almost be like designing 10 different games or a
Whole
game with
universe.
10 different expansions, as opposed to just the individual game.
So we started designing this in early 2020, and we didn't really wrap everything. I mean, you saw it came out in Kickstarter last year. So it was a 4 year plus process. And during that process, my kids would come up to me because other games that we would have made during that time had been made and came out. They're like, why is this taking so long? And I tried to explain to them it was kind of like the difference between making an independent movie and an Avengers movie. It was very much like, okay, this is this giant epic thing. And like you said, it's literally making 13 games in one game. So we're making this epic, huge project. And in the meantime, you can make smaller ones that can go through the process. But when you're making a legacy game, it's not just, okay, here's the game, try it out. It's okay, here's the game. Does this match what just came before? Does it make sense what's going to come next? Do these components have to go here or do they have to come in later? When do you put this? When do you do that? And there is so much more of an organizational flow that needs to be wrestled and wrangled than, just a standard Back to the Future game or, Mass Transit or whatever else would be there where we've got, okay, we're going to go from start to finish and we're gonna pass it on along. This one is okay. We're gonna go from start to finish. Then we're gonna do it again. Then we got to make sure everything kind of goes back and forth and works.
One of the things that made the journey so interesting is the genre of legacy games was really maturing while we were making this. Pandemic and Pandemic Legacy and Forbidden Island and that series really started things going as far as cooperative games that got into interesting series. And Pandemic Legacy, as far as I'm concerned, season one is the prime events that everybody wants to get to. But people early on said, we don't want to destroy anything. When Risk Legacy came out, one of the big deals was, at the end of this game, tear up this card. And we went, what? And so we had to decide how to make the game evolve from episode to episode without destroying anything. And that in and of itself is a design layer doesn't exist in most board games.
Yeah, I feel like the other, I don't know if it's a constraint, I don't know if it's a barrier, but I think the other thing to acknowledge is Flashpoint is an incredibly successful game. I mean, there are 718. When I was researching this, I was like, it must be 7. It might be 71. 718 tens on Board Game Geek. 2,300 nines on Board Game Geek. How has it been kind of interacting with the Flashpoint community and with the initial designer, the other Kevin? I don't know, but Kevin Lansing. How has that been as you all have gotten to this point now where the game is here? It is in North America. People are unboxing it. People are going through the scenarios and asking questions on Board Game Geek. And it's almost like now your Flashpoint has its own universe and people. What's that experience been like for you all?
I think that, well, first off, I'll start with what you asked about before. Kevin Lansing, the very first thing when we came aboard and we talked to Indy, we asked them immediately, what about the original designer of Flashpoint? If we're being tasked with making a legacy version, I would think if there was a Back to the Future Dice Through Time legacy version, we would hope to be the first ones that they would call to say, can you make this? So we said, how about Kevin Lansing? And we were informed that he's a great guy, still designs games, but he's kind of stepped away from Flashpoint. That's not something that he's involved with. A lot of the expansions that came out pre-2017 were other people. They weren't Kevin. He's kind of he made what we consider to be an amazing engine for a game. And for whatever reason, he just said that's good. I don't know that that's true, not true, whatever it is. However, that's how we were given that information. We ran with that information. We did reach out to another person who would help us with a Flashpoint Legacy game on the second half, which was Rob Davio. We reached out to him to pick his brain about the legacy side of things.
Probably a good call, right? Probably a good call to make.
He knew some pitfalls. He knew some ways to get around some things, so that was really helpful. But Flashpoint is an amazing game. And one of the things that Kevin and Ken and I believe is that Flashpoint should be an evergreen game that is selling a ton of copies. It should be in mass market stores. It should be all over the place. It should be something that's brought up by families as the game that they love to play together. It deserves it. It's good enough to do that. I think it's got the expandability within its own package, but then other things that have come out. And that's where we're really excited, because once Indie showed a willingness to expand that universe with more stuff, whether it's legacy or other things, we got very excited and said, we can be stewards of this franchise. We can really expand this in a way that the fans would like. And we really respect what the fans have to say, because these are people who stuck with the game for over 10 years. They love the game, and it's evolved already. I mean, when the first game came out, it had hotspots. That was one of the big things, basically little trouble spots that would pop up on the board. And if you rolled that spot, it would be an explosion, and the little hot spots would be out there. Well, I'm just going to be blunt. We hated that. we thought that was not that much fun. And then we find that there's Tragic Events, which is an expansion that came out that introduced event cards that did away with the hotspots and made the game a little bit more thematic. And we thought, what an amazing advancement that was on the core game. Now, that's not to say for people who like hotspots, that's great. You can play the game that way. We just think it's more fun getting more immersed in the danger of the game by having events. And that's definitely a place when we talked about Legacy, we said, these events are a real way into each and every one of these maps. And it's also a way we can put some of our goofy personality into here, which is why about 75% of them have like pun-filled fire names that have to do with the map, because we can have some fun with it. And so we embraced what had been done with Flashpoint. We tried to bring it to another level. And then now to bring it to modern day with Golden State Heroes, we're introducing something called the Ignition System, which expands even further onto that idea of event cards that match up with every board, and they bring them to life in new ways. And we think that that's something where, if we really hope, knock on wood, Flashpoint continues to roll out new products, this Ignition System will be a new way for that to happen in each and every set that goes forward. But we really embraced what the fans loved about Flashpoint. And we're not the only ones who said we don't enjoy hotspots. That was something where a lot of people were like, let's leave that in the past and let's do events. And we're like, yes, we will lock arms with you and walk that way together. So we love what the fans are doing. There's certain things they've been asking for a long time. We're hoping to bring those to life for them. And then there's certain things that the fans ask for that we have to look at and say, yeah, even as fans, we would like that. We also understand the reality of how the business world works. It might not happen that way.
A real building that you put on your tabletop.
Yeah. Real building, or some people want to have
real fires.
Entirely new molds of firefighters with every set, and it's really expensive to make new molds of firefighter pawns. So
I gotta laugh on that. When you go onto a Kickstarter page and somebody's like, I want bigger molds, I want acrylic, I want metal minis, I want minis that will disintegrate.
Yes.
So
one of these days, in one of these sets, we're going to get what Kev wants the most, which is flash paper, like a magician would use. So when you're playing the game, there'll be poof, some smoke and fire, because that would be pretty darn exciting.
Yeah. So explain a little bit about the new system that you have coming out. So the Flashpoint Legacy just released, and you have the Golden State. What's the title again?
Golden State Heroes.
Okay.
Yeah. In Golden State Heroes, we have one of the things we wanted to do was try to make this evergreen happen by making each episode more. The original Flashpoint game had 2 buildings, 2 sides of one-story building, and each expansion had 2 maps. We wanted to tell a story of 6 different maps that were significantly different from each other, but had a unifying theme. And it was coincidental that we were talking about Golden State Heroes before the wildfires in LA came out. But we thought that the flash of Hollywood and Southern California was a big part, which is why we have a theme park, a sound stage, a yacht. Help me out, guys.
Actually, I'm gonna say this, Kev. Where did Golden State Heroes come from? And I'll give you a hint.
Chris and
Who are you gonna call to get this answer?
Yeah. So Chris and I were watching the Ghostbusters movie. I think it was the Frozen Empire one. Yeah. So we're sitting there and we're eating a popcorn and waiting for the movie to come on, and we're talking to the kids and stuff. And then we started brainstorming because that's what we do. And we talked about. I said it would be really cool if we could do a map in like a sound stage. And then in the darkness of the movie theater, I could see the bright white of Chris's eyes as they got bigger and bigger. And he's like, and a theme park. And we're like, California. And then as soon as the movie was over, we're texting Ken, what about California? What about California? Hey, that sounds great. And then, it just kind of went from there.
Yeah. But the point is, in Golden State Heroes, we have 6 maps instead of 2. And each one has its own unique features. But the other part is, instead of each of the roles in an original Flashpoint game just being a job description, like a hazmat technician or a medic or a fire dog, each of the characters in Golden State Heroes is a person with a backstory. And the backstory ties into their special ability. But we also didn't want each of those characters to be tied down to just their own special ability, which is where the gear and the boosts come in. And I'll let the other guys talk about that.
Yeah. So we and I just want to say we wanted to infuse this with an action movie feel. So the whole thing, Golden State Heroes, it has a very California sunset 80s action movie feel. Everything's a little bit heightened. Everything's got a lot of that California personality. It's just really big, right? And we had hit upon in Legacy the idea of the skills that you would get and equipment you would use. Well, we modified that system a little bit to create the ignition system. At the beginning of each game, you will look at 4 pieces of gear that your firefighter might be able to use, and you get to equip 2 of those. They may give you new actions, they may give you a special ability or let you move differently, so you get to equip 2 of those gear, and that makes your person unique. You also will look at 3 pieces of boost, or 3 boosts, and which are like moments of action movie awesomeness, and you get to keep one of them as an active boost, and it's a one-time use thing. So it might say you get to flip this and move to any space on the board. Or you get to flip this and you can change to another firefighter immediately. And then you get rid of that boost, and your other one at the end of your turn flips up and becomes your new active boost. Those are like one-time, really cool things that you get to do during the game. And you choose when you want to do it. You get to see what those are. At the end of every call, we call each episode a call. At the end of a call, there is a locker envelope which has new gear and new boosts, and you get to pull those out and choose which ones you're going to add to the pool, so that at the beginning of the game you might see those new things. And a lot of times those will make sense based on what you just did. So if you just went and did something in like a 2-story building, the new gear and stuff you get might be new ladder equipment or things like that. So there's new ways to customize the firefighters in ways that was never available before, even more than you could with Legacy. These are kind of new and changeable ways of doing it. So that's the first part of the ignition system that is really fun, is customizing the firefighters. And I'm going to send it over to Kev to talk about the other half of the ignition system with the events.
Yeah, so that was one of the things, like we talked about with Legacy. We really wanted to inject as much theme and as much personality as possible, and to make each map just something spectacular that you can continue to play over and over again and just have all kinds of fun with. And we found the best way to heighten that kind of drama and tension and everything was through events. The random things that happen, good or bad, in a call that you just can't predict more than, a dice roll. Because, everybody can predict a dice roll. They always go so well for everybody. But these are an extra level of what is happening, but in a fun thematic way that isn't dry and is just something that every player is going to lean a little bit and go, what does that say? And how is this working? And, that's something that we tried to do, like I said, in Legacy, and I know they did it in Tragic Events and stuff, and we tried to refine it and just build it up. And we even went as so far as to create event decks for those previous maps that never had them. So now the original Flashpoint game will have its own event deck. So if you want to play with those event decks, you guys are going to be able to do that. And we've tried to add that kind of levels of fun and excitement and
That's cool.
Just different things to kind of bring old Flashpoint and Ignition System Flashpoint on the same level. So if you are a fan of the Generalist and you're like, that's my guy, I love the Generalist, you can do it using the gear and the boost system on any map with event decks, with other things. And, hopefully people who've played Flashpoint for years, for a decade with their kids, and their kids started playing it when they were 6, now they're 16 and they're still playing it together, they're going to get a new level of fun and a new level of excitement, and it'll be almost like rediscovering what they fell in love with in the first time.
And with the gear system, you end a call with 2 pieces of gear, and you can say, well, that didn't work for me. Hey man, I love my helmet. I like my helmet. I'm going to keep my helmet. And you put that, the player card is actually an envelope, and you leave that in there. And next time when you start and you draw your 4, that one that's in your envelope is part of those 4. You can save 1 or 2.
Yeah.
And so you can take your 2. Oh, helmet, I'm so happy to see you again. But wait. Ooh, this is a cool, super shiny fire hose. Goodbye, helmet. I'm going to take this. So your characters can develop and change over the course of replaying. And you can make your decisions based on what you think is going to happen in the map in front of you. And of course, what you think is going to happen in the map in front of you
It's always what happens, right?
will be changed by the event deck.
So would you describe this, the Golden State Warriors, as more or Heroes, as a more of a campaign style as opposed to a legacy style, or can you just pick up and go into any map that you want, or is it also legacy? Where would you put it on that scale?
It is definitely not a legacy game. It is, yes, they are. I would consider it like 6 episodes of a classic TV series. Okay. You can go back and watch any of the episodes, and they're going to have a start and an end. And if you want to experience it in a longitudinal fashion, if you want to binge it, you can, but you don't have to. So it's definitely not a legacy game, and it has a loose connection to a campaign, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, I would say that you can jump in any call you want. The way that the call guide is written is it's going to give you the rules for an entire call right there. You don't have to. It's not just going to give you, here's what's different in this call. It's going to give you a full setup for each call, so you can go there. And then the nice thing is too, depending on who you choose to be, if you're Carlos Quinn in this one, it might say in the setup, Carlos Quinn knows this place like the back of his hand. You're going to get 2 saved AP to start if you choose him as your person. So there'll be like a special ability for that person to get. But yeah, it does tell a story of Gold Company across 6 adventures, but none of the story is dependent on what came before. Other than you will unlock new gear and boosts for playing a call, you don't have to play one. If you want to jump right into the theme park and you want to skip the yacht, go for it. If you want to jump all the way down to the end where there's an overpass and like literally hell has broken loose with cars smashed into each other and there's a helicopter flying around and all this stuff's going on, you can do that. but it might behoove you to play through some other ones where you were introduced to some of those crazy concepts, and then it culminates in that last one.
Yeah.
But you don't have to. You can jump around and play it in any order you want.
So what?
I'll also say, just wanted to make sure I make this clear too. We talk about Legacy, we talk about Golden State Heroes. The original Flashpoint game and its expansions, and then the Ignition series, which starts with Golden State, are kind of one type of thing. They can kind of mix and match with each other. Legacy is a little bit removed. It's sort of, we go back to the Chronoverse, multiverse thing, right? Legacy has some things with it, the way that the characters are set up, they're stickered and things like that, where sometimes they don't exactly work with the other timeline quite as well. And they can, but it's not really designed that way. Legacy is sort of its own thing. It's self-contained. However, we did grab some things from Legacy that we're now bringing into the Ignition series, and we can make them go back into the old stuff too. One of those is debris. So debris was introduced in Legacy. Now there's chunks of ceiling that are coming flying down, and they can knock you down. That's something we introduced in Legacy, and it worked really, really well. It integrated so well that we said, let's make debris an ongoing regular thing, just like fire, smoke. Now there's debris. That's just one of the things that's in every single call in Golden State Heroes.
All right, and that one is currently up on Kickstarter right now, right? And when does that campaign end?
It is ending
19th?
19th or 20th.
Yeah.
And then what's
Okay.
the future for that series? What would you like to tell our audience or tell the world about that series? Do you have anything concrete that you'd like to discuss? Or is this where we get into the, can't talk about it part of the episode?
You ask a very good question. Would you like to talk about the future? And the answer to that is yes, we would like to talk about the future. I will say this without divulging anything else. We have an incredibly amazing follow-up to Golden State Heroes. But the fact is we haven't even pitched that one exactly yet to Indy, so we probably don't want to talk about it until we do. But I will say this. That one is Golden State's amazing. We love it. We love what we did with that. We took the Ignition system and we said, let's really open this thing up and see what we can do. And the next one is...
We turned it to 11.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. The odds are you're going to like that one a lot if you like Golden State. So we would love to talk about it. But honestly, right now, part of what this is like a pledge drive, right? We need people to show up for Flashpoint because we need to make sure that Indy knows that Flashpoint is a brand, it is a franchise, it is a line that deserves a ton of love and new items and new releases. I think they have a lot of love for it, and obviously they've stuck with it for a long time. But really what we're showing them is how many fans are out there and how many fans want more Flashpoint. And so as these releases come out, when Golden State's out there, we really need for people to step up and say, I love Flashpoint, I want more, more, more. And that's going to let us keep doing it, which is something we desperately want to be able to do.
I'll push a little farther than that. There's
Full
a lot
details of the game.
No. There are a lot of people who really enjoy Flashpoint and who own all of the previous stuff. And that core is wonderful, and we believe that we've done something to honor those people. But there are also thousands of people in the 21st century gaming world who have never played Flashpoint. And we think that those people need to play it and find out just how incredible it is. Golden State is our attempt to reach those people. So
Well, I think-
if we reach those people, the momentum will be phenomenal. If we don't reach those people, this will be a nice nostalgic trip, and then we'll see what happens way down the road. I don't want to wait for way down the road.
You're going to be over 1,000 backers, by the end of the day today. So
Yeah, but
go ahead.
But
Sorry.
we have 3 times that many for Legacy.
We love this Flashpoint community. They are just passionate and excited, and they want more, and we want to keep giving them more because we made a list, and I'm telling you, there are some good things that can come down the road.
Yeah.
I mean,
Wait.
there was a fan today on Board Game Geek, and I hope they get some adrenaline from me saying this, but a comment today was, I'm over here in London, and I would really like to have an ignition system that was set in things that happened in jolly old England. I said, we'll write that down. Thank you very much.
That's awesome.
Well, I think there is something about Flashpoint that, when you say, would you say it hasn't had anything since 2017 was the last?
Correct.
Before Legacy, yeah.
Before Legacy. And when did the original game come out?
2011.
11. So there's something about that game that every once in a while when Michael and I will play a game that is an older Euro title or something that came out around that time, and you play that game now, and a lot of times there's a refreshing feel of playing those games, because sometimes the stuff that's coming out now seems so, the wrong word is kind of convoluted, but there's so many rules and exception rules, and I gotta add this on because it was a Kickstarter, and there's this addendum and this expansion and these bonus characters and all this stuff, that sometimes that simple game is so refreshing. And I feel like Flashpoint has that, where the cooperative game genre at some point, flew off the rails, where I was a very big cooperative game player when I first started, and, Pandemic and Flashpoint and things like that. And then it got to a point where it's like, no, these rules, I shouldn't need a doctorate to get through the rules to play this cooperative game with my friends. So I think there is something there of what you're talking about, Ken, of modern players playing this and being surprised by the simplicity or the elegance of an earlier design that is not bogged down by all of the extras that seem to have made their way into game design recently. So I hope I wish you luck on that, because I think there is a need for that.
Yeah, I think elegance is the perfect term. And again, I have to give credit to my two partners. Chris is always looking for, why do we need this rule? Can we do this rule? Can we do this fun with two less rules? We are very allergic to fiddliness. When you play a game, that there has to be, okay, when a rabbit here occurs here, you must put a carrot in spaces 2 and 3. That's not fun. That gets us off the experience.
That's called bookkeeping.
Yeah, we want a minimum of bookkeeping and a maximum of fun.
The more
Awesome.
people we can gather around the table, the better. And the best way to do that is just keep bringing the fun and keep it moving and simple and new and different each time.
Well, we appreciate that. We really appreciate your time today, guys. And we have just at least 2 more questions. I know Doug will ask one of them for sure, but I have a question that just kind of has emerged throughout this interview. The firefighting community, if anyone knows a firefighter in their life, they're some of the hardest working men and women in our society. 24 on, 24 off, 48 on, 48 off, and just the sacrifice that their families have to make. What type of feedback have you had, and how conscious are you of that community? I mean, we're talking about a game and explosions, but that's a community where people are truly putting their life on the line. So I'm wondering if you could kind of share with our audience and just share your experience of working around a game that is centered around an incredible community.
So, like I had mentioned earlier, my dad was a firefighter for a while before he passed away, and my uncle was a fire chief, and I know different firefighters and stuff. And that's why when we did say we're going to do, Flashpoint Legacy, those were the first calls I made, because I wanted to do honor and justice to the job that they do and the service that they provide, and take it seriously as we can while still making as many dad jokes and puns as we can squeeze into it. So there isn't a decision that we make that isn't concerned with honoring firefighters and the risks they take every single time. Trying to separate that with, you know, rolling dice, moving pawns, and having fun. It's not always something that's easy to do, but every decision we make is with thought of firefighters front of mind, for sure.
Mm.
I'll also add to that so I have cousins and uncles who were firefighters in back in the day, and they're heroes. They risk their lives. They work hard. But I will tell you something. They are also some of the funniest, most, self-deprecating, down-to-earth people in the world. And they're not walking around saying, I'm a hero.
No.
They're walking around saying, I'm a guy doing a job.
And they keep a clean kitchen generally, right?
Yes.
I mean, you have a firefighter, man. They keep a clean kitchen.
And I think that it was important for us to make sure it's a work of fiction more along the lines of the movie Backdraft than a realistic depiction of what firefighters do, because there's a lot more trauma and a lot more danger in what they really do than there is in what the normal person, who just wants to kind of live out that sort of heroic firefighter life would experience. So we definitely, like Kev said, we had nothing but respect for what they do, but we definitely said, we're going to get a lot of this wrong, and that's on us. So it really is that thing. If this feels right to a firefighter, that is a testament to Kevin's family and the people he talked to who helped with that part of it. Anything that's wrong about the game as far as like this, not realistic at all, that's on the three of us just making choices and saying we're going to make this an approachable thing that like normal people would just want to be firefighters.
Yeah.
And I also want to just take a second to address, I think we said this earlier, but I want it to be really clear. We started working on this game about 2.5 years ago, Golden State Heroes, I think.
Something like that. Yeah.
And we watched in horror as the wildfires hit Southern California last year. And we had an honest conversation where we said, should we even be making this game? We stopped development and thought about it really hard. And we actually had people reach out.
Why is that? Because you're worried about profiteering off of the real life tragedy? Okay.
The way that game development happens, it happens a long time ago before you see the game that comes out today. The game you see today took at least probably a year of development and shipping and all that, but most likely it was more like 2 or 3 years. So this game, when we put our hearts into this thing, it was well before this happened. And yeah, when those fires happened, our hearts went out to those people. We all knew people who were affected by it, and we didn't want it to seem at all like we were like jumping on the bandwagon and being like, yeah. And none of the maps in Golden State Heroes specifically had to do with fighting wildfires. And what was amazing to us was as things began to settle down there, people who live in California were writing to us saying, you should make a game about this. You should set a game here. These people are heroes. My friend lost his home. You should make a game about the heroes who helped during that time. And it was honestly kind of moving and not something we expected at all. And that's not to say that we're still at all making light of what happened and hopefully won't happen again. But, I mean, we're living in a world we're living in right now, and you just don't know what's going to happen in the future. But we never meant for Golden State Heroes to ever be a comment on what happened last year because it was developed way before last year. And we put a line in the rulebook saying that we dedicate the game to the heroes, the first responders who were there in Southern California last year because they helped so many people. And so we take that, whether it's Golden State Heroes, Legacy, whatever, we know that we're making a game that is at least partly based on real people who are putting their lives on the line to help other people. And that's not a small thing. That's an amazing thing. And so despite all that goofy fun we're having and rolling dice and everything, we know that there is a real beating heart to what we're making a game about here.
And I want to add on to the heart thing. I've been playing games now for 64 years. Since my parents gave me a Pressman 52 game chess at age 5. What motivates me in designing and playing games is finding ways for people to connect positively across the table. My motto is, some play to win, I play to grin. Okay? I don't want to beat somebody by 17 points in a slugfest. I don't get any joy out of that at all. But in a cooperative or collaborative game where there are moments where, Kev, remember when that happened? Chris, you remember when that happened?
Yeah,
Michael, you
definitely.
remember when that happened?
Oh yeah.
If we have those moments, then it's a game I'm going to get off the shelf again. And that motivates a lot of the design decisions that we've put into both of these Flashpoint games.
Well, that is a great segue, and maybe your answer will be the same for our final question, which is one that we ask everybody that's on the show. Chris answered this the first time he was on, and he'll have to answer it again, and maybe it'll be a different
it's changed,
answer.
Yeah.
But what's awesome to you guys about tabletop gaming? Stumped him.
Yeah, I've referenced this a little bit before, but for me, it's the moments around the table when something happens and it becomes a celebration of something. Um, I kind of got into this industry and everything a little bit later. I didn't realize that it existed until Roll For It came out, and Chris said, "Hey, here's this other universe," and I was like, "What?" So I'm a little late to it. So when we can get around a table and you can create a memory that you're still talking about every time you pull that game off the shelf, or every time you get together with someone, go, "Oh, remember when we played this and that happened?" And everybody just starts laughing, and it becomes something of a core memory. That to me is the best part, and the possibilities for that are just epic and endless. And I am always grateful when I experience one of those.
For me, it's taking a person, and I don't care where they're coming from, the more varied the better, who comes and says, "Board games, you mean like Sorry or Clue or Trouble?" And I say, "Let me show you something. What do you enjoy doing?" And they'll say anything. And I'll pull a shelf and say, "Here, look at this." And have their eyes get a little wider and their pupils dilate a little bit. And it says, "Wow, this is really fun." I've had community game nights in my house for 16 years now, every 1 to 2 weeks. And we have many, many people in Southwest Michigan who are now lifelong friends who wouldn't have talked to each other walking down the street before they met each other at game night. And seeing that pool is enormous, that can be connected in so many ways, is really what makes me smile.
And Chris, has your answer changed?
Yeah, I think I probably said something similar to what Kev said the first time. And what I love most about tabletop games, though, is dice. That's really my answer at this point, and I'm going to stick with it. But it's true, though. So, okay, bear with me here. You roll dice, you don't know what the outcome is going to be, right? And so it incorporates that, leaning into the table, waiting to see what's going to happen. It's the great equalizer. You may be way ahead, but you roll the right die and something happens. So it's those moments. And I think when I think back to my childhood, the games that got me into this, it was Yahtzee, it was Risk. These are games that involve dice, and you never knew what was going to happen. The biggest game I've ever made that sells well and I hope keeps going for my kids is Roll For It, because it's about rolling dice and matching the cards. These dice right here are instrumental to Flashpoint. You will roll these coordinate dice to see where the fire is going to show up. And I guarantee you, at least one time a day, when you're playing the game, you're going to go, "Do not roll 3-4 or we're dead." And someone rolls and goes, "It's 3-4. Boom. Right? Or the other way around, please, please, please roll 3-4 because then we win. And you roll and everyone leans in and goes, yes, you rolled 3-4, we did it. So to me, there's a lot of ways to have fun with games.
Yeah.
You can have fun with cards, you can have party games, you can have spinners, you can have whatever, but there's nothing like dice. Everybody gets behind a dice roll, and even in a competitive game, like Roll For It, someone's going after a big card. They've been going after that card for a while. They roll just the right dice they need to get that card. Everyone at the table erupts in applause. So for me, it's the moments, obviously, but I think my favorite thing with tabletop games is the dice, dang it. I think it's those dice, those little plastic buggers.
It's funny when you play enough games, even bad rolls become funny. Like,
Yes.
you can be playing a game that's predominantly dice, and it's like sometimes it's just not your night, and I can't seem to roll anything that I need. Every turn is going wrong. And it's funny because there's a pivot point where, like, the first time it happens, it's like frustrating. Second time, you're like, ugh. And then the third time it happens, you're like, I guess that's just my night, and we're just going to have fun with it that I can't roll at all tonight.
Yes.
And
We all
it
had
works
that
out,
night where-
and it's still
Yeah,
enjoyable.
You go from despair, or even that feeling of getting really irritated about this, to, okay, this has become funny. Now I hope I don't roll what I need. And that becomes like the signature of that moment, which is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I still have there was a dungeon crawl we played very early in game nights a long, long time ago, and the one girl that was playing with us, like, it was synonymous that Jane was just not going to roll well. So we're going through this dungeon, and it's like, well, if the die rolls up to Jane, we're probably losing. Like, she will be dead immediately. And that just became part of her character. And it was like that thing that, you know, when you talk about, Ken, of like, oh, you remember when that happened, or what, you know, those type of things, that is something that I remember from that. And that game was probably 12 years ago that we played that, you know, and it's still a thing that it's like, I could call her up today and say, hey, remember how terrible Jane was at rolling dice and how she was decimated by monsters every time because she could never roll what she needed? And it was one of those things where it was like, she had every boost. It was like, I'm rolling 15 dice this time, and none of them would be a hit. You know, it wasn't even like, oh, you roll that one, hope it's good. It's like, no, I've got every buff. I've got every special ability. I'm rolling all of these dice. I have the 5 blessed dice, and they're all disastrous. So those stories are cool. So I appreciate you sharing that, Chris.
The other thing that I love, Doug will do in a co-op that doesn't end the way we want it to, he'll take an extra turn, but it's very clear that we lost. And everyone's kind of, you know, a little sorrowful. And then that is exactly, well, let's just see what would have happened if we got one more roll of the dice and one more flip of the card. We were that
We
close.
are big proponents. We are huge proponents of the what if turn. And that might be at the end of the game, but it might also be like in a press your luck game. If you know, if you chose and you chose wrong.
It's official. The designers are saying it, Michael. It's legal.
No, I'm all about a mulligan on the golf course. If you lose a co-op, you lose a co-op. You got to go back to work.
I agree.
You got to
We
set
still
it up and go
lost.
again.
Oh yeah,
It's all
counts as a
legit.
loss.
We're
Okay,
not changing the outcome.
It's just let's take a look into the multiverse. What would
And see how close we were. It makes me feel better about how I want to try again, because we were just that one turn away.
Well, who
still
am I to
lost.
argue with the team from Chronoverse Labs here? So we're very fortunate to have Chris and Kevin Rodgers and Dr. Ken Franklin on the show. If you've listened to this long, I hope that you've already gone out and backed the project. Flashpoint Golden State Heroes. I do have a question, because I will oftentimes listen to a podcast in the future, and this is so if somebody wants to late back, or maybe they are in the year 2026, what's the best way for them to get a hold of Flashpoint Golden State Heroes after the project is closed on Kickstarter?
Well,
It will never be available again. Buy now.
No. Elite Boards and Cards really wants this to be in stores. My local game store here in Kalamazoo, Michigan, got its first copy of Legacy of Flame day before yesterday. So it's going to be in your friendly local game store, and and through your distributors and wherever you want to buy games.
So if you're
Awesome.
if you're listening in 2026, drive to Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Yeah,
and visit
that's how I
Kev's
heard
bookstore.
it too,
Probably got
Kevin.
it.
And then if you time it
They
right,
sold out immediately after it came out. So they
sounds
don't
like
have
there's
any, but
a great game night there too, where you might be able to stop by, play a board game, get a signed copy as well. I'm all about a trip to Kalamazoo.
Every other Saturday for the rest of eternity at the Franklin Funstead. You come by and let's play some games.
You got that, Doug?
Yep, I'm uploading the address to the website right now. All right,
You
so
guys laugh, but Ken would have you guys, your friends, your family, everyone.
Yeah.
If you want a caravan to his house for one of his game nights, he opens his house up once a month?
No, it's twice. It's every other Saturday.
Every other Saturday. He
This
opens up
Saturday,
his house
the 5th, 6th, 7th.
and invites anyone who wants to come and play. Bring a dish to pass, play some games. It is an absolutely delightful time. So, hey, do it.
I'll start cooking the brisket on Thursday night and bring a 17-pound packer cut with me. So
Oh, man, now I have
Okay,
to
well
go.
now, just let us know when you'll be there because I want to
Yeah, we'll carpool. We'll be there.
we don't care about Ken. We just want Michael's brisket now.
We'll
I
wear
care
our
about
Cub
Ken.
hats. We'll wear our Cubs hats. And we'll come
Sounds
on
good.
out.
It does.
All right, so as of this episode coming out, there should be about a little under a week left to back Flashpoint Golden State Heroes. So don't even listen to the closing. Turn this off immediately and go back it. That would be great. But again, thank you, Kevin, Chris, and Ken for coming on and sharing some time with us and talking about designing the games you've worked on, the ones that are coming out. We appreciate it. And thank you so much for spending the time with us.
Thanks for having us on.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Absolute blessing. Thank you very much.